Hello everyone, my name is Kashif, and today we'll be diving into a tragic and mysterious case. On September 22nd, 2023, Suzanne Morphew's remains were discovered, 3 years after her sudden disappearance on May 10th, 2020. The Colorado Bureau of Investigation found her remains during a search in Chaffee County, which was part of a separate investigation, sparking new attention into this cold case. That Suzanne's tumultuous personal life and inconsistent statements initially led authorities to focus on her husband, Barry, as the prime suspect in what they believed was a murder. However, new evidence has raised doubts. Over a 2-year period, over 70 investigators and 1,000 hours of work went into Suzanne's case, with 135 search warrants issued and more than 400 interviews conducted. Eventually, the police charged Barry with first-degree murder. However, the case took a turn when the charges were dropped due to insufficient evidence and mishandling of the investigation. Still, many believed Barry was guilty. The discovery of Suzanne's remains, 50 miles from the original search area, along with DNA evidence linking her death to a suspected serial killer, raised even more questions. Was Barry more resourceful than authorities realized? Or did something else from Suzanne's past play a role in her death? Suzanne Morphew was born on April 11, 1971, to Jean and Adrian Alexandria. She grew up with 2 brothers, David and Andrew, and was known for being an intelligent and thoughtful friend. In 1998, she met her future husband, Barry Morphew, while in high school. They married after 6 years of dating. Barry was a talented ball player, signed by the Toronto Blue Jays, while Suzanne pursued an education degree at Purdue University. However, Barry's career was cut short due to injury, and he transitioned to a career in horticulture. Suzanne worked as a teacher for 4 years before Barry started his landscaping business, which grew steadily. The couple had 2 daughters, Mallory and Macy, and lived a seemingly perfect life in Indiana until Suzanne was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. She successfully overcame the illness twice. In 2018, the family moved to Maysville, Colorado, for a fresh start, closer to their daughter Mallory, who attended Western State University. They bought a beautiful 7-acre property where Barry enjoyed hunting and volunteering as a fireman, while Suzanne retired from teaching to focus more on church and her new interest in mountain biking. Despite appearing as the ideal family, the Morphews faced their own struggles, which would come to light after the events of May 10th, 2020. That day began differently from most Mother's Day celebrations. Barry and the girls left the house, leaving Suzanne alone. Barry claimed to be on a landscaping job in Broomfield, 3 hours away. The girls went camping, and they planned to return home later that evening to celebrate Mother's Day with Suzanne. However, when they tried to contact her, they received no response, which was unusual, as Suzanne was very active on social media. After several hours of silence, Mallory and Macy contacted their neighbor, Martin Ritter, to check on Suzanne. Mrs. Ritter visited the Morphew home around 4 to 4:30 p.m. and found the house empty. She immediately called Barry, who instructed her to check if Suzanne's mountain bike was there. When it wasn't, Mrs. Ritter called the police, beginning the investigation into Suzanne's sudden disappearance. At around 4:30 p.m., Barry Morphew and his 2 daughters returned home, anxiously awaiting any news about Suzanne's whereabouts. The police, meanwhile, had made a significant breakthrough in the investigation. Just hours into the search, deputies discovered Suzanne's mountain bike near a steep ravine, not far from the Morphew home. This discovery seemed to suggest that Suzanne might have been involved in a crash. However, upon further inspection, there were no signs of a struggle. There were no skid marks to suggest she had used the brakes, no damage to the bike despite it tumbling down the ravine, and no blood or disturbed vegetation in the area. It seemed clear to deputies that the bike had been intentionally placed there. When Barry was informed about this discovery, his response was unusual. He suggested a mountain lion might have been responsible, an odd theory that marked the beginning of several bizarre explanations he would offer throughout the investigation. Many who were involved in the search, including Suzanne's brother, Andrew, found Barry's behavior strange. Andrew, who was skeptical of Barry's story, believed Suzanne might have gone missing the day before, on May 9th, rather than on Mother's Day. Suspicion began to shift toward Barry when Suzanne's helmet was found 1 mile away from their home. in the exact direction Barry's truck's telemetry data showed he had driven that morning. Initially, investigators might have dismissed this as an odd coincidence, but the discovery was in the exact opposite direction of the Broomfield construction site that Barry had claimed to be visiting. In his preliminary interview with authorities, Barry said he woke up at 4:30 a.m. and headed straight to Broomfield. However, the telematics from his truck showed he had driven 1 mile west before reaching the construction site. When confronted with this discrepancy, Barry gave a strange explanation. He claimed that he had been scouting elk early that morning, curious about their direction, so he could track them later. Barry had a history of tranquilizing elk and removing their antlers for sale. When the officers pointed out that he couldn't have spotted the elk at 4:30 a.m. if he was just waking up, Barry changed his story. He admitted that he hadn't set his alarm for 4:30 a.m. and had simply gotten up early on his own. When asked about the events of May 10th, the day Susan went missing, Barry described it as one of the best days the couple had spent together in a long time. He claimed that after working with a coworker in Salida, he returned home early, went on a hike with Suzanne, grilled steaks, and even had an intimate evening with her. Barry suggested that this might have been the last time they saw each other. But as we know, his reliability as a witness was questionable. As the investigation continued, it became clear that Barry's story was full of inconsistencies. When police analyzed his phone and vehicle telemetry data from May 9th, 2020, they discovered significant discrepancies. While Barry had said he spent the afternoon and evening with Suzanne, the data didn't match his account. At 2:42 p.m., his phone showed erratic movements around their property. When confronted by investigators, Barry explained that he was likely hunting chipmunks with tranquilizers at that time. Later, at 2:47 p.m., he switched his phone to airplane mode, a move that only deepened investigators' suspicions. By 10:17 p.m., even the steak dinner Barry claimed to have shared with Suzanne was brought into question. Investigators found only one dirty dish instead of two, raising doubts about his account. Later that night, as they continued to examine data from the property, more troubling details emerged. At 9:30 p.m., an hour after Barry said he had gone to sleep with his wife, his car was seen reversing 96 feet in the driveway. Investigators speculated that this could have been when Barry loaded Suzanne's body into his truck. From 3:25 to 3:48 a.m., the telematics showed that the door to his truck opened and closed over 80 times. Although circumstantial, this evidence hinted that Barry wasn't being truthful with the police, prompting a deeper investigation into the events of May 10th. Interviews with Barry's co-workers revealed he wasn't even supposed to be in Broomfield that day, as his contract wasn't set to start until a week later, meaning there was no project for him to inspect. Barry had claimed he visited the Holiday Inn, a job site, a local store for granola and water, and briefly stopped at McDonald's to clean his windshield. However, surveillance footage contradicted his story. Barry was seen disposing of 5 trash bags near McDonald's and the Holiday Inn. When confronted with the footage, he gave an odd explanation, claiming he disposed of the trash to avoid disposal fees. This excuse fell apart when investigators examined his car, and a co-worker reported smelling bleach and chlorine in Barry's hotel room a day after Suzanne's disappearance. Additionally, investigators found that Barry had changed his clothes several times throughout the day. Despite these troubling actions, investigators had not yet uncovered a clear motive. That changed when they delved deeper into the couple's personal lives. Suzanne and Barry's daughter revealed that their marriage was far from happy, contradicting Barry's portrayal of a blissful relationship. Text messages from Suzanne's phone, recovered from the house, showed she had been deeply unhappy in the marriage. She had noted in her phone that Barry refused to consider a divorce, and she even feared being alone in a room with him. Suzanne had also expressed concerns about his drinking and suspected he was unfaithful. When the police searched the Morphew home on May 20th, they discovered a spy pen Suzanne had purchased to catch Barry in the act. Ironically, the pen recorded her affair with a man named Jeff, a former high school classmate. The affair had been ongoing for about 18 months, starting in 2018. Though Jeff initially seemed like a prime suspect, the police were able to rule him out. Investigators speculated that Barry had discovered the affair, which seemed likely based on a note Suzanne had written just 2 days before her disappearance, in which she mentioned Barry accusing her of having a boyfriend. This discovery, along with other evidence found during their search of the house, painted a darker picture. In the dryer, they found the cap of a tranquilizer dart. In the bedroom, a spent bullet casing, a large crack in the doorframe, and what appeared to be remnants of Suzanne's journal in the fireplace. All of these findings, combined with the telematics data, suggested that Barry may have planned to murder Suzanne and likely killed her sometime on the afternoon of May 9th, 2020. Phone data from Suzanne's phone supported this theory. At 2:10 p.m., Suzanne sent her boyfriend a selfie and texted him 53 times, but she never used her phone again. The public didn't learn that Barry was a suspect in his wife's disappearance until 2 weeks later, when police conducted a 2-day excavation at one of his construction sites in Salida. In response, Barry released a strange video declaring his innocence. It wasn't until May 5th, 2021, nearly a year after the investigation began, that Barry was arrested. The evidence against Barry was largely circumstantial, but with his changing stories, repeated lies, and clear motive, the prosecution felt confident in their case. Barry was charged with first-degree murder, tampering with evidence, possession of a dangerous weapon, and attempting to influence a public servant. In addition to these charges, Barry was later accused of filing a fraudulent election ballot in Suzanne's name. He claimed he didn't realize it was wrong, stating that Trump could use the extra vote. Barry pled guilty to the charge and paid a $600 fine in August 2021. That a preliminary hearing took place in August 2021 to determine if Barry's case would go to trial. During the hearing, much of the case's evidence became public. Over 4 days, the prosecution presented their theory of what happened. Barry killed his wife on May 9th, 2020, dismembered her body in a hotel room, disposed of the tools used, and buried her in an unmarked grave. The defense strongly disputed the prosecution's version of events. They pointed out that cadaver dogs had failed to detect human remains in Barry's car and hotel room. They also suggested that evidence, like the dart bullet cover, might have been planted. Additionally, there were discrepancies in the photos of the dryer that raised questions about the evidence's authenticity. The defense further argued that it would have been impossible for Barry to have used his dart gun to assist in the murder since it was broken at the time. However, the defense's strongest argument came from the discovery of partial DNA found in Suzanne's Range Rover and on her bike helmet. None of the DNA matched Barry's. What made this finding significant was that the DNA matched samples from 3 unsolved sexual assault cases in Chicago and Arizona, raising reasonable doubt. The CBI investigator who collected the evidence went on military leave before he could follow up on this lead, and the defense team was never informed about the foreign DNA until the hearing, meaning the prosecution had withheld exculpatory evidence that could have helped Barry's defense. Throughout the hearing, the defense argued that with another potential suspect with a criminal record, the prosecution did not have enough evidence to convict Barry. They requested the judge make a swift ruling, but the judge delayed, citing the extensive resources dedicated to the case. Finally, on September 7th, 2021, the judge ruled that the case would move forward and set Barry's bail at $500,000. Barry was released from jail on September 20th, 2021, just 9 days before his trial was set to begin. However, on that same day, the prosecution filed a motion to dismiss all charges against him. The case against Barry was dismissed without prejudice, meaning the prosecution could reopen the case at any time if new information emerged. However, with reasonable doubt regarding Barry's involvement and misconduct on the part of the prosecution, securing a conviction would have been difficult. Additionally, the prosecution missed several crucial deadlines, resulting in the exclusion of 14 key witnesses. The dismissal of the case shocked the public, and Barry was seen leaving the courthouse with a big smile on his face, accompanied by his 2 daughters. That on September 22nd, 2023, investigators unearthed several shallow graves in Moffett, Colorado. Suzanne's remains were identified through her dental records and chemotherapy port over 50 miles away from the area initially searched, the mountains surrounding Barry's property. With the discovery of her body, questions arose about whether Barry could still be considered a suspect, especially since police were certain his truck was not in Moffett on May 9th and 10th. Some speculated that Barry might have had help disposing of her body, possibly traveling to Moffett to bury it and then returning. If authorities were to obtain a longer period of phone and car data, They might be able to link Barry to the location where Suzanne's remains were found. For now, though, Barry seems to be free of suspicion. Despite this, the police and the district attorney's office are continuing their investigation. The district attorney of the 12th Judicial District informed CNN that the case is still active and declined to comment further until more information becomes available. But they did express their condolences to Suzanne's family. Barry's attorney, Iris Etienne, has been vocal since the body was found, suggesting that Suzanne may have been one of many victims of a serial killer. The remains were discovered in a boneyard, and Etienne believes Barry was wrongfully targeted by law enforcement, hoping that they might eventually acknowledge their mistake. In the meantime, Barry has filed a $15 million lawsuit against the prosecutors, sheriff's department, and multiple investigators, claiming he was wrongfully charged in connection with Suzanne's disappearance and death.